Hi gang, Rob here. It is the afternoon of 19 November 2016 and I got a little knife review for you guys this afternoon, and it's a rather interesting knife, don't you think? This is the new G10 handled version of the Buck 830 Marksman. Pretty cool knife. And this one comes to us from a guy named Kevin Cleary. Kevin is from Ontario, Canada, has a pretty doggone good YouTube knife channel as well. When I did my 20,000 subscriber giveaway, although he's a pretty new channel, Kevin was sort of not eligible to win a prize in that 20K giveaway because his channel's too large to meet the criteria. But a relative newcomer on the YouTube knife reviewing scene is Kevin, and he does some great reviews. Very straightforward, talks about things about knives that just make sense, doesn't go off on ridiculous tangents like I do, doesn't seem to have any annoying pet peeves about knives that drive his viewers crazy like I do. Just a great, straightforward, and honest reviewer is Kevin. So check out his channel. I will link it in the description of this video. So let's talk about the knife. And thank you, Kevin, for sending it. I do appreciate it. I have not had an opportunity to even handle the G10 model of the Marksman, so I appreciate having this one in hand. So from Buck, and that's always an interesting way to start a knife review in 2016, a new knife from Buck. You guys know, if you've watched my channel for a long time, that the Buck 110 was the knife when I was a kid that I looked at and thought, oh my, would I like to have one of those. It got me addicted to the knife bug, or it gave me the knife bug, my addiction for knives. And I've been a knife guy ever since. So I have a sentimental, emotional attachment to Buck, and it's sort of like being a Cub fan. Although this is the year, if you're a Cub fan, go Cubbies, 108 years, world champions. And Buck is kind of like the Cubs. People don't know this about the Cubs, but 100 years ago, they were a force to be reckoned with. They might have been the best team in baseball at the turn of the 20th century. And we're that perennially. Kind of like Buck was in the 1960s and 70s as far as knife companies go. You know, if you wanted a good knife, you bought a Case. If you wanted a really good knife, you bought a Buck. When I was a kid. Yeah. But, you know, fortunes change, don't they? And Buck has been renowned over the last couple decades for making knives that sucked and knives that were hokey. Knives that sucked and knives that were hokey. Of course, they do still sell Buck 110s at Walmart for, what, $30? Unbelievable. But I digress, and I do that a lot, I know. So the 830 Marksman kind of follows a knife that got mixed reviews, the Vantage series of knives. The Vantage, a very attractive knife, pretty good ergonomics, good blade shape, good choice of blade steels depending on which price level you wanted to go with, but had some pretty severe construction and mechanical issues. It was, frankly, you know, in overall quality, if you looked at a sample size of 10 knives, there were glaring defects in 8 of them, probably. Hardware was very slipshod. Pivot kind of too small for the size of the blade. Just strangeness going on where the liner lock interfaced with the grip. Just an interesting knife, but a poorly made knife was the Vantage. So enter the Marksman. This is a collaboration with Grant and Gavin Hawk. Of course, the blade steel proudly S35VN, and of course the heat treat of Paul Boss on this knife. So if you're looking at a Grant and Gavin Hawk knife, you're probably looking at an innovative opening or locking mechanism, or both. Sometimes innovative equals hokey. Yeah, even with the Hawks, sometimes I just don't quite understand why they need to make things so complicated, except because they can. So this has what's called Buck's Hawks SLS system. Sally, Larry, Sally, which is kind of to say SLS system is redundant because the abbreviation SLS stands for, and guys, this was just a stroke of creative genius. The SLS system stands for the Strong Locking System. Strong Locking System, SLS. I mean, come on, how stupid is that? Come on, guys. Surely we could come up with a better name for it than Strong Locking System. It is rather innovative, though. And it really works. If you want a really in-depth look at how the SLS works, check out my original Buck 830 review video, or from the sharpening bench video it might have been. And I'm going to link that in the description, as well as Kevin Cleary's review of the 830. I think he looked at the aluminum handled one as well as I did. This knife, I think, was about brand new to Kevin when he sent it. So here's kind of what happens. The blade tang and its rather intricate machining as it rotates interface with this strap spring in a various number of ways. So as the blade closes, a portion of blade tang interfaces with the spring, raising it up, and then it snaps into this sort of notch behind the flipper, which rests the blade as a detent when it's closed. And then also with the strap as a detent, we have a flipper that just works amazingly well. You can also sweep it open with the oval hole. Kind of hard to flick, not super hard to flick open if you get good at it, I guess. But the real magic happens here at the top of the blade tang. So this notch, first this little nub in the tang comes around, raises the strap, and then it snaps over that tooth to create a super, super strong lock. So this strap spring fits over a boss in the backspacer, which I believe is steel. Yeah. And it sort of adjusts like a chainsaw. So you have two locking screws and then an adjustment screw here in the back of the backspacer. So you loosen the locking screws, make your adjustment with a Torx driver through that hole where that adjustment screw is, and it moves that strap fore and aft to kind of adjust how it locks up on that tooth as the knife wears. So you can see that slope on this surface going down. So as the lock wears, it's going to drop farther onto the tooth, and you want there to be a little daylight, I guess, between frame and strap if you're adjusted properly. I did see some comments on my original 830 video talking about this adjustment system. then the hardware not being of super high quality. Some strip screw issues, I think. I can't verify that. I haven't had one of these in my rotation to be able to talk to that. I haven't really made any of those adjustments. So in theory, it all looks pretty interesting. That is a rather small adjustment screw, though. And guys, weigh in the comments if you've got any experience with that. So we've got a knife that is plain G10. There are no steel liners in this handle. The steel in the knife is the blade, the hardware, the strap spring on the back, the pocket clip, and the backspacer. Now there are, and I will include, if I can find it, the picture of the internals of the aluminum handled 830, so you can kind of see the parts that make up the business end of the knife around the pivot. I'm sure there are some hardened steel washers that sit in the recesses of the G10. You don't have bearings rolling on the G10, I'm sure. And I'll show you how the aluminum one looked while it was apart so you can see that. But what you achieve with that linerless handle is still really good strength. I mean, I can't squeeze it so that you can see. So you don't have a real flexible handle. I would imagine that spring sort of aids in that endeavor as well. You know, you're locked in here, you're locked in here, and you got a big wide piece of steel. It's going to be pretty hard to bend like that. So you got a knife that's a 3 9/16 inch blade, about 116 thousandths thick, a 4 3/4 inch handle, and it only weighs 3.7 ounces. I mean, it's a really lightweight knife. Balance point is, well, if I can hold it steady, right there, not bad. It almost needs that stainless steel backspacer just to give it some perfect balance, and it kind of has it. The knife does ride on ball bearings, if I haven't mentioned it yet, and they look a lot like that Benchmade bright red urethane housing for the bearings, and then a ring of teeny tiny ball bearings. Look at the flipping action. I mean, it just doesn't get any better. You can push button it, you can light switch it, and it comes out with authority and very little effort. No issues with an overly strong detent. The position of the flipper, that cam detent, and that super free blade with quite a bit of mass just make the knife work great. To release the lock, you just sort of dig your finger into the jimping on the side of the strap and just push it up slightly, and then sort of fling the blade in. Try not to hit your camera. And that blade is very good looking, isn't it? It's got that sort of high speckle stonewash going on. And you would expect that piece of S30V is well heat treated. Just a nice drop point. Ergonomics and all grips are really good. Overhand pinch good, hammer is good, saber grip is good. No jimping on the top, but you don't need it with the nice deep finger groove. Draw cut grip excellent. That sort of vertical draw cut grip isn't very comfortable, but it isn't on a lot of folders. And reverse grip is great. Great tactical knife, great large EDC knife. Now I'm going to get to the one thing. Other than that, you know, a lot of you guys I know are not going to like the lock design. It looks weird, and it's frankly a little different than we're used to. But I'll tell you what, there's a lot of knife guys that got one of these. You know, the original aluminum handle version, and you know, they kind of did it like they lost a bet. Maybe carried it around with the Groucho nose and glasses and mustache because they didn't want their friends to see them carrying a buck, especially a goofy buck. And then after they watched a movie and played with it on the couch for a couple hours, they're like, dude, this knife is cool. Yeah, this knife is cool. So really not a lot bad to say. And then I got to get to this because it boggles my mind. One thing you'd expect from Buck, not that they have the greatest build quality in the world, not that their designs are necessarily on the money. Sometimes they have quality issues, but one thing I've always sort of been able to count on them for is that they can grind a blade. And this one, it looks like it's really nicely done. The finish is nice. There's no issues in the hole, other than it's kind of wire EDM'd and then tumbled. It's just not especially well finished inside, but okay. But here's my issue. You guys are not going to believe this. Look at that tip. There's very little distal taper in the knife. The edge grind, look at that. Just get out your little protractor in your mind for a second. Not only is that tip thick, but the edge grind at the tip is doggone 90 degrees inclusive. So I looked at that and I went, oh my Lord. How are you supposed to cut anything with that? So I got out the calipers. And this edge grind is not particularly narrow at any point. I thought this thing's got to be huge behind the edge. So back here we have about 50 thousandths. Right through here it drops down to about 47 thousandths. And then as we come to the tip, it's about 82 thousandths thick behind the edge at the tip. 82 thousandths. That's doggone near 3/32. The stock is only 116 thousandths thick, and it's 82 thousandths behind the edge at the tip. I don't know if it'll cut anything. This is... Oh, I'm going to embarrass it, I think, and get out a piece of phone book paper, but... The problem is, I don't even care if it's got a decent factory edge. There's a spot that's pretty sharp. Right through that. That's the thinnest part that's cutting right there. So they got an edge on it, but let's try it right at the tip. It'll tear it. It's just a shame, that it's like way thicker than a hinderer at the tip. Right here is the narrowest part, the thinnest part of the blade, right through here. That's just, I'm sorry, that's horrible. Look right here. It's worse geometry than a splitting maul. And then the other issue I have is we have a funky plunge grind, this weird angle thing going on. If you're cutting something here at the base, it's going to run into the shoulder and the handle. And they got a sharpening choil that's just not long enough. So you can see the factory sharpener ran into a little issue, and they just steepened out at the very base of the edge and has a nice little recurve on it. I expect that from Buck, but this grind thickness is just an issue. It's not a good cutter. It'd be a great prying tool, I guess. Too bad, because the rest of the knife is so cool. Check out the milling on that G10. Very nice, and a nice polished surface. This doesn't need to have texture on it. This pocket clip is a holdover, or at least mostly, from the Vantage series. Just a great clip. It attaches into the steel backspacer with two screws, and it's great. It's a tip up, left or right hand reversible. I had one of them on my Vantage and just loved it. Overall, a really good knife. It's just, the one thing that's sort of wrong with it keeps it from doing well the job a knife has to do, which is cut. If you guys were pinching this, you'd be laughing. It's just silly thick. So once again, Buck sort of almost gets competitive with a new offering. This knife will sell though. I did a little pricing research as of today, 19th of November 2016. $90 to $95 depending on where you pick this up. If you go with the aluminum version, aluminum and 154 cm, those are about $77, $78 on Amazon. So not bad buy. In either case, under $100 for a really strong, light and fast S30V defensive or large EDC blade. And apparently pretty well made. Blade centering's pretty good. There's no blade play. And of course, we know the lock is strong because it has the strong locking system. Oh, Buck, I just wish you'd get it all right one of these days. Maybe you will. Thought you'd like to see it. This one headed back to the Great White North. Kevin, thank you for sending it. And I'll get your baby back in your pocket soon. Grace to you and peace, my friends, from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. And remember, the word is sharp. The Marksman is from here to here. See you later.